So we're back with another street photography video. This time we are choosing to do it golden hour / nighttime because I really wanted to see what the Leica Q3 could do at night. And I had a couple of people from my weekly Bible study come out and help me. One of my guys, Randy, he has a motorcycle and I wanted to get some shots of him on his bike. With golden hour, it can be really amazing. And I love his helmet because it has a little splash of like reflective orangish red look, and it looks really nice. And then two ladies, Jasmine and Jesley, I know they would come out a little fashionista type of look, and it worked out for the most part. For me though, I do have a hard time trusting cameras on automatic. And I've seen other shooters use this on automatic, saying that it's kind of made for that, just to have a quick point and shoot experience. But man, I'm telling you, it's such a hard thing for me to do. I still have this thing in my head where if the ISO is too high, it's going to be a bad picture because there's grain and you want to eliminate grain. Or if your shutter speed is too slow, you're going to have blur and you might not want blur. You want the picture to be crisp. But there are some instances where having a low shutter speed would make a nice blurry picture. Like if that's the point of the picture, if that's the point of the image, then it will come out nice. Or if I actually wanted a little bit of grain in the picture just to make it look a little bit more film-esque, or maybe have an old school look to it, that would fit. And I was putting this on automatic and half pushing the shutter just to see the decisions it was making, and it would go to shutter speed 60, ISO like 6400. And I was like, that's crazy settings just to make sure the exposure is right. But I'm gonna have to do this again just so that I can have everything on automatic and see what type of images this creates with just everything on automatic. So the next video is definitely going to be that. But overall, I really love the golden hour images that this had. One of my favorite features is that even when the sky looks blown out, if I bring the details or the highlights down, there's still a whole lot of color in the sky that it contained, or that it retained. And I love that a lot about this camera, that if I choose to have a really well exposed image, or if I wanted it to be a little brighter, if I decide to take the exposure down in the post-production, then there's still a lot of information that is saved, and that is just amazing for a camera this size. Another thing that I was really trying to learn in a low light experience was just making sure my focus was just on point. Whenever I'm taking pictures of people especially, I always try to have the focus on the eyes. That is just one of the most important things for me. And unless I'm doing something where I want the focus to be on the lips, or maybe their hands are really nice. And for this, I had it on zone for the focus. And one thing I noticed about zone was if I had zone on somebody's face and they were a little bit further away and their whole head was in zone, their eye necessarily won't be in focus. Like it's going to choose something in that zone to focus on, but it won't necessarily be their eye. So just with that, I learned that the zone focus area might not be for portrait photography. And the reason I wasn't going strictly to eye, face, body detection was because I'm at a mall and there's a lot of people walking around. So it would go from my subject to a person in the background or somebody else who might be, you know, in the foreground. And I really didn't want that. So a lot of times when I'm shooting people in public places, I like to show that they're in public. So I like to use, you know, other people in the shot to make the picture look a little bit more interesting. And it kind of sucks that I had to take my subject somewhere else, a little bit isolated, just to take a picture. So I'm gonna practice with that because I'm assuming it was user error and not having enough practice with this camera. But just for last night, it was a little chore to try to figure out how to get the focus that I like. There were a couple shots that I actually loved, and I got to use the macro lens portion of this camera, was the nails. So I had seen that Jasmine, she has some really nice nails, like they were really unique looking. So I wanted her to put her hand on her face and just kind of look away so I can really get up close to the nails. And the macro function on this camera is ridiculous. Like it's amazing to have both features. Like I can shoot somebody far away and get really close detail if I wanted. And with 60 megapixels, like the detail of her hands were ridiculous. So I'm super happy about that, and I hope to use that feature more in the future. For street photography, it could be a little bit hit or miss because I'm not really sure what things I would take close-up pictures of, like that especially, but it's good just to have. Overall, it's a nice little addition to this. Now, when it got pitch black, like really dark, and all I could use for lighting was like the street lights or some car lights that are passing by, it was tough to shoot this on the settings I would normally shoot it on. For the most part, I was having it on, the shutter speed was 250, ISO was between 50, and I was trying to keep it under 1600, but I was not able to do that. I had to take the ISO up to 6400. The aperture is at 1.7, and it was still pretty dark. But what I'm happy about was that the grain that was in the image for the nighttime stuff, it was easy to remove in post, and it didn't make the image less sharp, which is a big deal for me because that just means I can fix it later. I mean, with all of the AI software that's out now, all of the updates that Lightroom and Photoshop is getting, having a grainy image is not the end of the world anymore. And I know, like 3 years ago, it was tough to remove some grain from an image, and retain color. But now it's not that big a deal. So if something comes out a little less promising, or a little less, what's the word I want to use? A little less desirable, I will just bite the bullet in person and fix it later. The colors were still popping, even though it was low light, which is something I really loved. And taking pictures at night, I realized that this camera does really well at making some really moody looking images if I wanted to expose it correctly. Like, there was a shot where Randy was standing in front of Cheesecake Factory and you could hardly see his face, but because he was dressed in his motorcycle, safety gear, it actually looked really nice. I wouldn't necessarily have Cheesecake Factory behind him with what he was wearing, but composition wise, I kind of liked the way the image looked, so I just kept it that way. Victoria Gardens doesn't really have a lot of sports stores or anything for motorcycle riders, so I couldn't take a picture in front of a store like that. But overall, I liked how he looked in that image. So if I just cut out Cheesecake Factory, zoom in on him, the way he looks under that street light was freaking fantastic. And then I took a picture of him with the exposure proper, and you can see the grain, but again, you can remove it however you want. Overall though, I definitely want to redo this shoot because I don't think I tested it correctly. I want to put everything on automatic and really give this camera a test in the automatic functions, because I've seen more than one shooter do that with this camera and their images look great. And I'm just have to trust it. Like, if I see settings that I wouldn't necessarily have for myself shooting manually, I'm just going to have to trust the camera is know what it's doing. And if I need to make minor adjustments, then I'll do so. But overall, this camera is really smart. It's really sharp. And another thing, one more thing that I really love about this is when I was taking pictures, I didn't think that the focus was in the right area. So some pictures I automatically thought I'm going to have to delete that and just practice on my focusing. But when I took it in post, the sharpness of the image was exactly where I wanted it to be. So that is something to note if you are taking pictures, or if you're a new Leica user and you're going to be taking pictures with this. Say if you're coming from a Nikon system, a Canon, Sony, whatever, I'm used to how the Sony, when I have clicked the shutter, you'll hear a little beep sound and the focus area will turn green. It doesn't do that here, but it still focuses exactly where you want it to, which is something that I have to learn how to trust in this system because I'm still fairly new to it. But all of my pictures, for the most part, came out really, really sharp, exactly where I wanted them to. And because it's a 28 and you're not super tight on a person anyway, showing the sharpness from far away looks different than if you were to have a 50 millimeter. So as long as the person's head is in focus, it looks like a great picture. And because it was darker, I was pretty much at 1.7 the whole time. So getting the person's head or face in focus was more important than just getting the eye, especially if I'm not taking macro photography the entire time. So overall, this did really great. In the next video, I'm going to be automatic everything, aperture, ISO, shutter speed, the entire shoot, and we're going to see what it can create. But if you're new here, please click that like button, click the subscribe, share this video with a friend, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm done.